The first rays of dawn painted the sky in shades of rose and gold as Maya pressed a gentle kiss to Sophie's fevered forehead. Her daughter's small body burned with heat that had persisted for 3 days now, and Maya's heart clenched with worry that wouldn't ease. "Mama," Sophie whispered, her voice barely audible, her 3-year-old hands reaching weakly for her mother's face. "I'm here, baby. I'm right here," Maya murmured, cradling her daughter close. The cramped studio apartment they called home seemed even smaller in moments like these, when fear made the walls press in. She had spent the night alternating between cold compresses and whispered prayers, watching the clock tick toward morning with growing dread. Maya was only 28, but sometimes she felt decades older. Life as a single mother working as a housemaid for one of the city's wealthiest families had etched lines of exhaustion across her face that belied her years. Her hands, once soft, were now rough from endless cleaning, scrubbing, and polishing the marble floors of the Montgomery mansion. She glanced at the clock. 5:47 a.m. In 13 minutes, she needed to be ready to catch the first bus across town. Mrs. Victoria Montgomery, her employer's fiancée, demanded punctuality above all else. Maya had learned that lesson the hard way during her first week, when arriving 5 minutes late had resulted in a 20-minute lecture delivered in Victoria's crisp, cutting tone. "Sophie, sweetheart, can you open your eyes for Mama?" Maya asked softly, stroking her daughter's damp curls. Sophie's eyelids fluttered, but didn't open. The child had barely eaten in 2 days, managing only a few sips of water and some broth. Maya had wanted desperately to take her to the doctor, but the visit would cost money she didn't have, and missing work would mean losing the pay she needed for rent, due in just 5 days. The weight of impossible choices pressed down on Maya's shoulders as she gently dressed Sophie in soft cotton pajamas and wrapped her in a light blanket. She had made a decision in the dark hours of the night, one born of desperation and maternal instinct. She would ask Mrs. Montgomery for a day off. Just one day. Surely, even Victoria's ice-cold heart would understand a mother's need to care for her sick child. Maya dressed quickly in her black uniform, her fingers trembling slightly as she buttoned the crisp, white collar. She gathered Sophie in her arms, feeling how light her daughter had become, how fragile. The little girl nestled against her mother's shoulder with a small whimper that broke Maya's heart into 1,000 pieces. The bus ride across town was torturous. Sophie dozed fitfully against Maya's chest while other passengers cast worried glances their way. An elderly woman offered Maya her seat, her eyes soft with grandmotherly concern. "That baby needs a doctor, dear," she said kindly. Maya could only nod, blinking back tears. By the time they arrived at the Montgomery estate, the sun had fully risen, casting long shadows across the perfectly manicured lawns. The mansion rose before them like a castle from a fairy tale, all white stone and gleaming windows. Maya had worked here for 2 years, and the contrast between this opulent world and her own humble life never ceased to sting. She entered through the servants' entrance, as always, and made her way to the small room off the kitchen where staff kept their belongings. She created a makeshift bed from her coat and an extra tablecloth, laying Sophie down as gently as possible. The child's eyes opened briefly. "Where are we, Mama?" Sophie asked, her voice small and confused. "Mama has to work for just a little while, baby. You rest here, and I'll check on you every few minutes. I promise." Maya kissed her daughter's forehead again, noting that the fever hadn't broken. Her hands shook as she smoothed Sophie's hair. She found Victoria in the morning room, already dressed impeccably in a cream silk blouse and tailored trousers, her blonde hair styled in a perfect chignon. She was reviewing wedding planning documents, her diamond engagement ring catching the light as she made notes with a gold pen. "Mrs. Montgomery," Maya began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I apologize for the interruption, but I need to speak with you about something urgent." Victoria looked up, her blue eyes cold and assessing. "You're 2 minutes late, Maya. I noticed." "Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry. My daughter has been very ill, and—" "Your personal life is not my concern," Victoria interrupted, returning her attention to her papers. "We have the engagement party tomorrow. Everything must be perfect. I need you to deep clean the ballroom, polish all the silverware, and ensure the guest bathrooms are spotless. Maya's heart sank, but she pressed on. I understand, Mrs. Montgomery, but Sophie's fever has been very high for 3 days. I was hoping I might request tomorrow off to take her to the doctor.
Just 1 day, please.
Victoria's head snapped up, her expression hardening. Absolutely not. Tomorrow is one of the most important days of my life. I need all hands on deck. You knew the engagement party was scheduled weeks ago. I did, but my daughter should have other arrangements, Victoria said sharply. I'm not unsympathetic, Maya, but I pay you generously for your work, and I expect reliability. If you cannot manage your personal responsibilities alongside your professional ones, perhaps this position isn't suitable for you. The threat hung in the air between them. Maya knew what it meant: comply or be replaced. In this economy, with her lack of formal education and single mother status, finding another job that paid even half as well would be nearly impossible. She swallowed hard, feeling tears prick at the corners of her eyes, but refused to let them fall. I understand, Mrs. Montgomery. I'll complete all the tasks you've assigned. Maya's voice was hollow, defeated. Good. Now, I believe you have work to do. Victoria dismissed her with a wave of her hand, as one might shoo away a bothersome insect. Maya retreated to the servants' area, checking on Sophie before gathering her cleaning supplies. Her daughter was sleeping, her small chest rising and falling in shallow breaths, her cheeks flushed with fever. Maya pressed the back of her hand to Sophie's forehead and felt her heart break a little more. The fever was worse. But what choice did she have? The morning stretched into afternoon as Maya worked with mechanical precision, her mind constantly drifting to the small room where Sophie lay. Every 15 minutes, she found an excuse to pass by, stealing glances at her sleeping daughter, adjusting the blanket, feeling her forehead, whispering words of comfort. The ballroom was an enormous space with floor-to-ceiling windows and crystal chandeliers that scattered rainbow light across the marble floor when the sun hit them just right. Maya had cleaned this room dozens of times, but today it felt like an impossible task. Her arms ached as she pushed the mop across the vast expanse of floor, working in careful sections to ensure not a single streak remained. The scent of lemon polish filled her nostrils as she worked, making her slightly dizzy. Or perhaps it was the lack of sleep catching up with her. She couldn't remember the last time she'd had a full night's rest. Between worrying about Sophie and working long hours, exhaustion had become her constant companion. Maya, the silver isn't going to polish itself. Victoria's voice echoed through the hallroom, sharp and impatient. Yes, ma'am. I'm nearly finished with the floor, Maya called back, pushing herself to work faster despite the fatigue weighing down her limbs. She had just begun to tackle the mountain of silverware, dinner service for 50 guests, plus serving pieces, when she heard it. A small, weak cry from the servants' area.
Sophie.
Maya's hands stilled on the silver serving spoon she'd been polishing. Every maternal instinct in her body screamed at her to run to her daughter, but she forced herself to set down her cloth carefully, to walk rather than sprint, to maintain the composure that was expected of her. She found Sophie sitting up on the makeshift bed, tears streaming down her flushed cheeks. The little girl's eyes were glassy with fever, and she was trembling. Mama, I don't feel good, Sophie whimpered, reaching out with both arms. Maya scooped her up immediately, feeling the alarming heat radiating from her small body. This was worse than this morning. Much worse. Sophie's skin was burning up, and when Maya looked into her daughter's eyes, she saw a glazed, unfocused quality that sent panic shooting through her veins. I know, baby. I know. Mama's here now. Maya rocked Sophie gently, her mind racing. She needed to get her daughter to a hospital.
Now.
This wasn't just a fever anymore. This was something serious. She carried Sophie back toward the morning room where she'd last seen Victoria, her heart pounding. Professional consequences be damned, her daughter came first. She would find another job somehow. She would make it work. But right now, Sophie needed medical attention. Victoria was in the corridor, speaking on her phone, when Maya approached with Sophie in her arms. The older woman's eyes narrowed with annoyance at the interruption. I'll call you back, Victoria said into her phone, ending the call. Maya, what is the meaning of this? Why is that child here? Mrs. Montgomery, please. I need to take my daughter to the hospital right now. Her fever is dangerously high. I'm sorry, but I have to leave. Maya's voice was steady, but her eyes pleaded for understanding, for a sliver of human compassion. Victoria's face hardened into an expression of cold fury. You most certainly will not. I told you this morning that I need you here. The engagement party is tomorrow, and nothing is ready. Your personal drama is not my problem. My daughter is burning up with fever. Maya's voice rose, desperation overriding her usual deference.
She needs a doctor.
Please, I'm begging you. And I'm telling you no, Victoria snapped. You have responsibilities here. If you leave, don't bother coming back. Do you understand me? Sophie began to cry harder, burying her face in Maya's neck. The sound of her daughter's distressed whimpers made Maya's decision crystallize. She would lose this job, yes, but she would not lose her child. Then I quit, Maya said quietly, the words feeling both terrifying and liberating. I'm sorry, but my daughter's life is more important than polishing silver. Victoria's face flushed with anger. You ungrateful, after everything I've done for you. The generous salary, the generous? Maya's own anger finally sparked to life. You pay me minimum wage to work 12-hour days, 6 days a week. You've never once asked about my life, my struggles, or shown me a moment of kindness. I've worked myself to the bone for you, and the one time I ask for basic human decency, you threaten my livelihood. How dare you speak to me that way? Victoria's voice was shrill now. Security will escort you out. You're fired. Neither woman had noticed the tall figure who had entered the corridor during their exchange, standing silently in the shadows of the doorway, observing everything. Alexander Montgomery, billionaire heir and Victoria's fiancé, had arrived home earlier than expected from his business trip. He had heard raised voices and come to investigate, and what he was witnessing made his blood run cold. This was a side of Victoria he had never seen, cruel, heartless, vindictive. The woman he thought he knew would never treat another human being this way, especially a mother with a clearly sick child. Alexander Montgomery had built an empire on the foundation his grandfather had laid, transforming a successful regional business into a multinational corporation. At 35, he was accustomed to boardroom battles, high-stakes negotiations, and complex deals. But nothing in his business experience had prepared him for the scene unfolding before him in his own home. He watched as Maya, a woman he recognized vaguely as one of the household staff, clutched a small, clearly ill child to her chest while Victoria berated her with a coldness that made his stomach turn. This wasn't the woman who had charmed him at charity galas, who had spoken so eloquently about her volunteer work, who had presented herself as compassionate and caring. Alexander had met Victoria Montgomery, née Ashford, 2 years ago at a fundraiser for children's hospitals, of all the ironic venues. She had been poised, elegant, and articulate about the importance of supporting sick children. He had been drawn to what he believed was her good heart, her dedication to charitable causes, her seemingly genuine desire to make the world better. Their relationship had developed quickly. Victoria knew how to be exactly what he needed: supportive during stressful business periods, charming with his associates, perfect for the role of wife to a man in his position. 6 months ago, he had proposed, and she had accepted with tears of joy that he now wondered might have been more calculated than genuine. But he had noticed small things over the months, inconsistencies that he had dismissed or rationalized away. The way she spoke dismissively about service workers when she thought he wasn't listening. The subtle cruelty in how she treated her own personal assistant. The flash of contempt in her eyes when dealing with anyone she deemed beneath her station. He had told himself he was imagining things, that the stress of wedding planning was bringing out the worst in her temporarily, that the woman he loved was still in there somewhere. But watching her now, seeing the absolute lack of empathy as she threatened to fire a woman holding a sick child, all his doubts crystallized into devastating clarity. Then I quit, he heard Maya say, her voice quiet but firm. The resignation in her tone, coupled with the protective way she held her daughter, struck something deep in Alexander's chest. Victoria's response was venomous, and Alexander felt something inside him snap. He stepped forward into the light, and both women turned toward him, startled. Victoria's expression shifted immediately, transforming from fury to delighted surprise in a fraction of a second, a change so swift and practiced that it sickened him. Alexander, darling, I didn't know you were home. Victoria moved toward him, her voice suddenly warm and affectionate, but he held up a hand to stop her. Don't, he said quietly, his voice carrying an edge of steel that made her freeze mid-step. I heard everything. Victoria's face paled slightly, but she recovered quickly, her expression shifting to concern. Alexander, you don't understand. This employee has been completely unreliable, and with our engagement party tomorrow, I simply cannot. Her daughter is sick, Alexander interrupted, his eyes moving to Maya and the child in her arms. The little girl's face was flushed with fever, her eyes half closed, her small body limp against her mother. Concern flared in his chest. She needs medical attention. Yes, well, that's unfortunate, but it's not our responsibility, Victoria began. It's our responsibility as human beings, Alexander said, his voice hard. He looked at Maya directly for the first time. How long has she been this ill? Maya hesitated, clearly uncertain about this new development. Her eyes were red-rimmed from unshed tears, her face drawn with exhaustion and worry. 3 days, sir. The fever keeps getting worse. And you've been working this entire time? He asked, though he already knew the answer from what he'd overheard. I couldn't afford to miss work, sir. I tried to ask for tomorrow off, but… She trailed off, glancing at Victoria. Alexander felt anger building in his chest, cold and controlled. What's your daughter's name? Sophie, sir. She's 3 years old. The child stirred at the sound of her name, whimpering softly. Alexander's heart clenched. He thought of his own nieces and nephews, imagined any of them this sick, imagined someone preventing their parents from getting them help. Victoria called Dr. Harrison. Tell him we need him to come immediately, Alexander said, pulling out his phone.
What?
Alexander, he's our private physician, not… Victoria protested. Now, Victoria. The command in his voice left no room for argument. He turned back to Maya, who was staring at him with a mixture of confusion and desperate hope. There's a guest room on the 2nd floor, 3rd door on the left. Take Sophie there and get her comfortable. Dr. Harrison is the best pediatrician in the city. He'll be here within the hour. Sir, I can't possibly. I don't have money for a private doctor, Maya started, her voice shaking. You won't be charged a cent, Alexander said firmly. And you're not fired. In fact, take the next week off, with full pay. Focus on your daughter. Tears finally spilled down Maya's cheeks. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you so much.
Go, he said gently.
Take care of her. Maya hurried toward the stairs, cradling Sophie close. Alexander watched her go, then turned to face Victoria, who was staring at him with barely concealed fury masking as confusion. Alexander, what are you doing? Why are you interfering with household management? I was handling, Victoria began. Handling? Alexander's voice was quiet, dangerous. You were bullying a desperate mother and threatening her job while her child suffers. That's what you were doing. I was maintaining discipline. If we allow staff to simply leave whenever they have personal issues, the entire household will fall apart. You don't understand how. What I understand, Alexander interrupted, is that I just watched my fiancé threaten to fire a woman for wanting to take her sick child to a doctor. I watched you show absolutely no compassion, no humanity, no basic decency. Victoria's expression hardened. Oh, don't be so dramatic. These people, they always have sob stories. If you give in to every request for time off, every claim of sick children or family emergencies, you'll be taken advantage of constantly. I'm simply being practical. These people. Alexander repeated, his voice dropping to a chilling quiet. These people? Do you hear yourself? You know what I mean, Victoria said dismissively. The help. They're not like us, Alexander. They come from different worlds, different values. You can't apply the same standards. Stop talking, Alexander said, and something in his tone made Victoria's mouth snap shut. In the 2 years we've been together, you've shown me a woman who cares about charity, who speaks passionately about helping others, who I believed had a good heart. But it was all an act, wasn't it? A performance for my benefit. Alexander, you're being absurd. I do care about charity. You care about being seen caring about charity, he corrected. You care about the galas and the photo opportunities and the social credit. But when confronted with actual human suffering right in front of you, you had nothing but cruelty to offer. Victoria's face flushed with anger. This is ridiculous. You're going to throw away our relationship over some maid and her brat. The contempt in her voice, the casual dismissal of a sick child as some brat, made Alexander's decision final. The engagement is off, he said quietly. The color drained from Victoria's face. What? I can't marry someone who lacks basic human compassion. I won't. This, he gestured around them. This isn't about class or privilege or household management. This is about character, and you've shown me yours very clearly today. You can't be serious. Victoria's voice rose, panic replacing anger. Alexander, don't be rash. We're getting married tomorrow. The guests, the arrangements. Will all be cancelled, Alexander said firmly. I'll handle the notifications personally. I'll take full responsibility publicly. But this is over, Victoria. Dr. Michael Harrison arrived 45 minutes later, his silver hair and kind eyes immediately putting Maya at ease despite her nervousness. Alexander had shown her to a guest room that was larger than her entire apartment, with a bed so soft Sophie had sunk into it like a cloud. Maya had been sitting on the edge, holding her daughter's hand, when the doctor entered. Mrs.? Dr. Harrison prompted gently as he set down his medical bag.
Maya.
Just Maya, sir. I'm not married, she said quietly, conscious of her status, her uniform, the vast gulf between her world and this one. Well, just Maya, Dr. Harrison said with a gentle smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. Let's take a look at this little one. Sophie, is it? Over the next 20 minutes, Maya watched as Dr. Harrison conducted a thorough examination with patience and kindness, speaking softly to Sophie, making her smile despite her fever with silly faces and gentle jokes. He checked her temperature, listened to her heart and lungs, examined her throat, and asked Maya detailed questions about the progression of symptoms. It's a severe bacterial infection, Dr. Harrison finally announced, his expression serious but reassuring. Likely strep throat that's developed complications because it went untreated. Another day or two, and we'd be looking at hospitalization, possibly serious complications. Maya felt her knees go weak, and she sank into the chair beside the bed. Oh God, she whispered. But we caught it in time, Dr. Harrison continued quickly, seeing her distress. I'm going to start her on antibiotics immediately. The fever should break within 24 hours, and she'll start feeling better in about 48. Complete recovery in a week or so with proper rest and medication. I can't afford. Maya started, tears streaming down her face again. Dr. Harrison patted her shoulder kindly. Mr. Montgomery has made it very clear that all medical expenses are covered. Your only job is to take care of your daughter. Now, I'm going to have my nurse deliver the medications within the hour, along with detailed instructions. Sophie will need to stay in bed, plenty of fluids, and someone should monitor her closely for the first 24 hours. I will. I won't leave her side, Maya promised, gripping Sophie's small hand. After Dr. Harrison left, Maya sat in stunned silence, processing everything that had happened in the last few hours. She had woken up this morning desperate and terrified, prepared to beg for a single day off. Now she was sitting in a room that probably cost more per night than she made in a month. Her daughter was receiving the best medical care available, and she had a week of paid leave. And it was all because of Alexander Montgomery, a man she had barely exchanged a dozen words within 2 years of working in his home. She had always seen him from a distance, the way household staff inevitably existed on the periphery of their employers' lives. She knew he was brilliant in business, that he was kind to the staff when their paths crossed, that he always said please and thank you, where Victoria never did. But she had never expected this level of intervention, of generosity, of genuine human concern. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Alexander himself stood in the doorway, looking somehow different than he had before. Less like the intimidating billionaire and more like a man genuinely concerned about a child's welfare. "How is she?" he asked quietly. "Dr. Harrison says she'll be okay. A bacterial infection, but the antibiotics should help quickly," Maya said, her voice thick with emotion. "Mr. Montgomery, I don't know how to thank you. What you've done, I can never repay." "You don't need to repay anything," Alexander said firmly, stepping into the room. He looked at Sophie, who was dozing fitfully, her small face still flushed but peaceful. "What I did was the bare minimum of human decency. What should shock you is that it was necessary at all." Maya didn't know what to say to that. Alexander pulled up a chair and sat down, and Maya felt a flutter of panic. Employers didn't sit and chat with the help. This violated every unspoken rule of their respective positions. "Tell me about her," Alexander said, nodding toward Sophie. "Tell me about your daughter." It was such an unexpected request that Maya found herself answering before she could think better of it. "She's my whole world," Maya said softly, stroking Sophie's hair. "She's smart, so smart it sometimes scares me. She taught herself the alphabet at 2, and she's already starting to read. She loves books about animals, especially elephants. She says she wants to be a veterinarian when she grows up." A small smile touched Alexander's lips. A noble ambition. "She's kind, too," Maya continued, the words flowing more easily now. "Even when we don't have much, she always wants to share. Last week, she gave half her sandwich to a homeless man we passed on the street. She has a heart bigger than anyone I've ever known." "She gets that from her mother, I think," Alexander said quietly. Maya looked up, startled, and found him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "I owe you an apology," Alexander continued. "I've lived in this house for 3 years. You've worked here for 2. And until today, I didn't even know your name. I didn't know you had a daughter. I didn't know anything about your life, your struggles, your circumstances. That's inexcusable. Sir, you don't owe me." "Yes, I do," he interrupted gently. "I've prided myself on being different from other people in my position, on being aware and conscious of privilege and responsibility. But I created an environment where someone like Victoria could flourish, where you felt you couldn't even ask for time off when your child was seriously ill. That's on me." Maya shook her head. "You didn't know." "I should have known. I should have made it my business to know. I should have created a household where you felt safe asking for help, where human need came before ballroom floors and silver polish." He ran a hand through his hair, genuine distress in his expression. "I'm going to make changes. Significant changes. Mr. Montgomery." "Alexander," he said. "Please, just call me Alexander." I couldn't possibly," Maya stammered. "You're not just the help, Maya. You're a person, a mother, someone who deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. Please use my name." Maya swallowed hard, overwhelmed by this surreal turn her day had taken. "Alexander," she said softly, testing the word. "Thank you. For everything. For Sophie, for the doctor, for being kind when you had no reason to be." "I had every reason to be," Alexander said firmly. "She's a child who needed help. That's all the reason necessary." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, both watching Sophie sleep. The late afternoon sun streamed through the windows, painting everything in shades of gold. "What about the engagement party?" Maya finally asked. And Mrs. Montgomery? "I heard what you said to her. But it's canceled. All of it. The engagement, the party, the wedding," Alexander said, his voice steady but weary. "I called it off." Maya's eyes widened. "Because of me? Because of what happened with?" "Because of who she really is," Alexander corrected. "You just helped me see the truth I'd been avoiding." I can't marry someone who would treat another human being the way she treated you and Sophie. I can't build a life with someone who lacks basic compassion. I'm so sorry, Maya whispered. Don't be. You did me a favor. Better to know now than years into a marriage. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Though I admit, the timing could have been better. We had 200 guests confirmed for tomorrow. 200, Maya breathed, unable to imagine such a thing. All of whom will receive personal calls and notes of apology from me by Monday, Alexander said, along with generous donations to their favorite charities in lieu of having hosted them. It's the least I can do. A soft murmur drew their attention back to Sophie, who was stirring. Her eyes fluttered open, clearer now than they had been all day. Mama, she said weakly. I'm here, baby, Maya said immediately, leaning close. Sophie's gaze drifted to Alexander, and her fevered eyes widened slightly. Are you a prince? She asked in a small voice. Alexander laughed, a genuine, warm sound that filled the room.
No, sweetheart.
Just a regular person. You look like a prince, Sophie insisted with a certainty only a 3-year-old could muster. From Mama's stories. Well, then I'm very honored, Alexander said seriously. What's your name, princess? Sophie, she whispered. I don't feel good. I know, Sophie. But the doctor gave your mama some medicine that's going to make you feel much better very soon. You just need to rest and be brave a little longer.
Can you do that?
Sophie nodded solemnly, then looked at her mother. Mama, can we stay in the castle? Maya's face flushed. Sophie, this is Mr. Montgomery's home and we. You can stay as long as you need, Alexander said quietly, looking at Maya. There are 6 guest rooms in this wing alone, all sitting empty.
Stay the week.
Let Sophie recover properly. Let yourself rest for once. I couldn't possibly impose, Maya started. It's not an imposition. Please. Let me do this one thing right. The next 7 days unfolded like a dream Maya kept expecting to wake from. The first night, she barely slept, sitting vigil beside Sophie's bed, monitoring her temperature, administering medication at precise intervals, and watching her daughter's chest rise and fall with each breath. By morning, as Dr. Harrison had predicted, Sophie's fever had broken. The little girl woke with clearer eyes and asked for breakfast, actual food, not just sips of water, for the first time in days. Maya had cried with relief, holding her daughter close and thanking God and the universe and Alexander Montgomery in equal measure. Alexander had been true to his word about making changes. The first thing he did was call a mandatory meeting of all household staff, a group Maya realized with some shock numbered nearly 20 people, from groundskeepers to the chef to the driver. Many of them she had never spoken to beyond brief nods in passing, all of them keeping to their separate spheres in the vast estate. Maya hadn't attended the meeting, staying with Sophie instead, but she heard about it from Marie, one of the upstairs housekeepers who brought her lunch that afternoon. You should have seen it, Marie said, her eyes bright with excitement as she set down a tray of soup and sandwiches. Mr. Montgomery gathered everyone in the main dining room, which has never happened before, by the way, and he apologized. Actually apologized for not being more aware of our working conditions and personal circumstances. He apologized? Maya repeated, stunned. Then he announced changes. Paid sick leave for everyone. A healthcare plan that covers our families, not just us. Raises across the board. A grievance procedure, so if we have problems, we can report them without fear of being fired. And he's hiring an HR manager specifically to handle household staff concerns. Marie shook her head in wonder. In 20 years of doing this work, I've never seen anything like it. 20 years. Maya asked, realizing how little she knew about her colleagues. Started when I was 18, Marie said with a smile. Worked for 5 different families before coming here 3 years ago. Mr. Montgomery was always better than most, but this is different. He said, she paused, her voice becoming soft. He said that what happened to you should never happen to anyone, and he was going to make sure it didn't. After Marie left, Maya sat in silence, processing this information. Alexander had taken her situation, her personal crisis and humiliation, and transformed it into systemic change for everyone. The thought was overwhelming. Sophie was improving rapidly. By the third day, she was sitting up in bed, coloring with crayons Alexander had somehow procured, along with a stack of children's books about animals. By the fourth day, she was well enough to move around the room, though Maya kept her activities gentle and supervised. Alexander visited every evening, always knocking softly, always asking permission to enter, always bringing some small gift for Sophie, a stuffed elephant one day, a puzzle another, a children's book about veterinarians that made Sophie's eyes light up with joy. "You're spoiling her," Maya protested gently on the fifth evening, watching Sophie cuddle a new stuffed giraffe. "I'm making up for lost time," Alexander replied, sitting in his customary chair. It had become their routine. After dinner, he would spend an hour in the guest room, sometimes talking with Maya about everything and nothing, sometimes reading to Sophie from her new books, sometimes just sitting in companionable silence. Maya had learned things about him in these evening conversations that surprised her. He had grown up wealthy but lonely, shuttled between boarding schools, seeing his parents primarily during holidays and formal occasions. His grandmother had been the one constant source of warmth in his childhood, teaching him that money was a tool for doing good, not a measure of worth. She used to volunteer at a soup kitchen every Sunday, Alexander told Maya one evening while Sophie dozed between them. "She'd bring me with her starting when I was 8. At first, I was terrified. These people looked so different from anyone in my world. But she taught me to see the person, not the circumstances. To listen to stories. To understand that luck and chance separate us far more than character or worth does." "She sounds wonderful," Maya said softly. "She was. She died when I was 16, and I think I lost my way for a while after that. Got too focused on the business, on achievement, on creating the image of success without thinking deeply enough about what success should actually mean." He looked at Sophie's sleeping form. "Your daughter reminded me. The way you fought for her, the way you were willing to sacrifice everything for her well-being. That's real success. That's what matters." Maya felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm just doing what any mother would do." "No," Alexander said quietly. "You're doing what every mother should do, but not every mother can, because systems are set up to make it nearly impossible. That's what I'm trying to change." As the week progressed, Maya found herself opening up to Alexander in ways she never had with anyone. She told him about Sophie's father, a charming man who had disappeared when she got pregnant, leaving her alone and terrified at 24. She told him about dropping out of college to work full-time, about the nights spent crying in her tiny apartment, wondering how she would manage, about the fierce love that had surprised her when Sophie was born, giving her strength she hadn't known she possessed. Alexander shared his own struggles. The pressure of living up to his family name, the isolation that came with wealth, the difficulty of knowing who genuinely cared about him versus who cared about his money. He told her about Victoria, about the red flags he'd ignored, about his relief mixed with sadness that the engagement had ended. "Do you regret it?" Maya asked on the sixth evening. "Calling off the wedding?" "Not for a second," Alexander said firmly. "I regret not seeing the truth sooner. I regret that she hurt you and Sophie. But ending it? That was the rightest thing I've done in years." On the seventh day, Sophie was declared fully recovered by Dr. Harrison. The little girl was back to her normal energetic self, chattering constantly, asking a million questions, and begging to explore the castle. "I suppose we should go home," Maya said that evening, though the words felt strange. The guest room had started to feel like a sanctuary, a place outside normal time and space where she and Sophie existed in a bubble of safety and care. "You could stay longer," Alexander offered. "Both of you. There's no rush." Maya shook her head gently. "You've already done so much. More than we could ever repay. But we should get back to real life. I need to find a new job, figure out our next steps." "About that," Alexander said, and something in his tone made Maya look up. "I have a proposition for you. Well, 2 propositions, actually." "Okay," Maya said cautiously. "First, I'd like to offer you a position as my household manager." Not as a maid, but overseeing all the staff, managing operations, and serving as the point person for everyone's needs and concerns. It would come with a significant salary increase, an office, and the ability to make decisions about how the household runs. Maya stared at him. I don't have any management experience. I barely finished a year of college. You have something better than formal credentials, Alexander interrupted. You have empathy, integrity, and the ability to see people as human beings. You understand what it's like to struggle, to worry, to need help. That makes you exactly who I need in this role. I don't know what to say, Maya whispered. Say you'll think about it, Alexander urged. But there's a second proposition, and this one is not negotiable. What is it? I'm setting up an education fund for Sophie. Full tuition, from preschool through university, whatever she needs to pursue her dreams of becoming a veterinarian or anything else she chooses. He held up a hand when Maya started to protest. This isn't charity, Maya. This is an investment in a remarkable little girl who deserves every opportunity to thrive. Tears were streaming down Maya's face now.
Why?
Why are you doing all this for us? Alexander was quiet for a long moment. Because a week ago, I watched a mother willing to sacrifice everything for her child while the woman I planned to marry showed nothing but cruelty. It was a mirror held up to my own life, my own choices, my own blindness. You and Sophie didn't just help me dodge a terrible marriage. You reminded me what truly matters. What my grandmother tried to teach me. How can I not want to help you in return? I don't deserve. Yes, you do, Alexander said firmly. You deserve stability. You deserve to not live in constant fear of one missed paycheck. You deserve to have dreams for yourself, not just for Sophie. Let me help make that possible. Maya couldn't speak, could only nod through her tears. 3 months later, Maya stood in her new office, a bright, airy room on the mansion's second floor with windows overlooking the garden, and marveled at how completely her life had transformed. She was wearing professional clothes that actually fit, clothes she'd been able to buy without agonizing over every dollar. Her hair was styled, her hands had softened with regular lotion and fewer hours of hard scrubbing, and when she looked in the mirror, she sometimes barely recognized herself. But the biggest change wasn't external. It was the absence of constant fear, the lifting of the weight that had pressed on her shoulders for so long. For the first time since Sophie was born, Maya could breathe. She had accepted Alexander's offer to become household manager, and the transition had been challenging but rewarding. The staff, who could have resented her sudden elevation, instead rallied around her. They knew she understood their struggles, their needs, their humanity. When Jorge, the head groundskeeper, needed time off for his wife's surgery, Maya approved it immediately. When Patricia, one of the housekeepers, mentioned her daughter's struggle to afford books for school, Maya worked with Alexander to create a lending library for staff families. The changes Alexander had implemented rippled outward, affecting not just the household but his approach to business. He'd begun requiring that all his companies offer comprehensive family leave policies, healthcare benefits, and living wages. Some board members had pushed back, but Alexander had been immovable. What good is profit if we achieve it by grinding people down? He'd asked at one contentious board meeting, or so Maya had heard from his assistant. Real success is creating systems where everyone can thrive. Sophie was flourishing too. She'd been enrolled in an excellent preschool, one Maya never could have afforded before, where her natural curiosity and intelligence were nurtured. The little girl's favorite part of each day was coming to the mansion after school, where Alexander had created a small library just for her, stocked with hundreds of books about animals. The relationship between Maya and Alexander had evolved into something neither had anticipated. They'd started as employer and employee, shifted to something like friends during Sophie's recovery week, and now existed in a space that defied easy categorization. They had dinner together 3 or 4 times a week, conversations flowing easily, sharing stories about their days. Alexander taught Sophie chess and read her bedtime stories when Maya worked late. Maya helped Alexander navigate social situations with greater awareness, pointing out dynamics of class and privilege he'd never noticed before. "You're making me a better person," he told her one evening as they watched Sophie play in the garden with a stuffed elephant he'd given her months ago. "You were always a good person," Maya replied. "You just needed someone to help you see clearly." "That's a generous interpretation of how blind I was," Alexander said wryly. The mansion felt different now, warmer somehow. Staff gathered in the kitchen for coffee breaks, sharing stories and laughter. Alexander no longer sequestered himself in his office or jetted off to business trips without a second thought. He was present, engaged, part of a community rather than a distant lord in his castle. On a sunny Saturday afternoon in late spring, nearly 4 months after that pivotal day when Sophie had been so ill, Maya sat in the garden watching her daughter play. Sophie was chasing butterflies, her laughter ringing out like bells, her health fully restored and her spirit bright. Alexander appeared with 2 glasses of lemonade and sat beside her on the bench. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked, handing her a glass. "I'm thinking about how different everything is," Maya said. "For months ago, I was terrified every single day. Terrified I'd lose my job, terrified I couldn't pay rent, terrified Sophie would get sick and I wouldn't be able to help her. And now. Alexander prompted gently. "Now I'm terrified for completely different reasons," Maya admitted with a small laugh. "I'm terrified this is all a dream, that I'll wake up back in that tiny apartment with nothing changed." "It's not a dream," Alexander said firmly. "This is real. Your job is real. Sophie's education fund is real. Your apartment," he paused, a slight smile playing at his lips. "Well, actually, I wanted to talk to you about that." Maya's heart skipped. "About my apartment?" "The cottage at the edge of the property has been sitting empty for 2 years. It's small but comfortable, 3 bedrooms, a garden, plenty of space for Sophie to play. I was thinking it might make more sense for you to live there, given how much time you spend here anyway. No rent, utilities included, and Sophie would have room to run around." "Alexander, I can't," Maya started. "Before you reflexively say no," he interrupted, "consider it from a practical standpoint. You're working here 6 days a week. Your commute takes an hour each way. That's 2 hours a day you could spend with Sophie instead. And the cottage is just sitting there, empty, contributing nothing to anyone's life." Maya bit her lip, tempted but hesitant. "People would talk. They already talk about how much time you spend with us." "Let them talk," Alexander said with a shrug. "I don't care what people say. I care about doing what's right, what's practical, what helps the people He paused, seeming to catch himself. "The people I care about." Maya noticed the hesitation, but didn't push. Their relationship existed in a comfortable ambiguity, neither quite naming what was developing between them, but both aware of the shift. "Can I think about it?" she asked. "Of course. Take all the time you need." Alexander watched Sophie for a moment, then said quietly, "She's an amazing kid, you know. You should be incredibly proud." "I am," Maya said softly. "Every single day." "I got a call from my brother yesterday," Alexander said, changing the subject. "He's getting married in the fall. He asked if I was bringing anyone to the wedding." "What did you tell him?" "That I wasn't sure yet. That things were complicated." He looked at her. "Are they? Complicated, I mean?" Maya's heart raced. "I think they might be. Good complicated or bad complicated?" "I'm not sure yet," Maya admitted. "You're my employer, Alexander. There's a power dynamic there that makes everything murky." "What if you weren't my employee?" Alexander asked. "What if you were just Maya, and I was just Alexander? 2 people who care about each other?" "But that's not reality," Maya said gently. "You're a billionaire. I'm a single mother who was cleaning your floors 4 months ago. The world doesn't just let us pretend that gap doesn't exist. Then we change the world," Alexander said with the certainty of someone who'd actually done it before. "Or, at least our small corner of it. We're already changing how this household works, how my companies operate. Why can't we change the rules about what's possible between us?" Before Maya could answer, Sophie came running up, breathless and beaming. "Mama, Mr. Alexander, I saw a butterfly land on a flower, and it was so pretty. Come see." They let her pull them to their feet, each taking one of her small hands, and followed her to where she'd spotted the butterfly. It was still there, wings slowly opening and closing on a bright yellow bloom. "Make a wish, Mama," Sophie whispered, as if afraid to scare the creature away. Maya closed her eyes. Once, she would have wished for security, for enough money to pay bills, for Sophie's health. Now those things were no longer wishes but reality. So she wished for something different, for courage to trust this new life, for wisdom to navigate the complicated feelings growing in her heart, for the strength to believe she deserved the happiness that seemed to be taking root. When she opened her eyes, she found Alexander watching her, not the butterfly. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, an understanding that didn't need words yet. "What did you wish for?"
Sophie asked.
"Can't tell, or it won't come true," Maya said with a smile, tousling her daughter's hair. "I wish that we could stay in the castle forever," Sophie announced, unconcerned with wish-telling superstitions. "And that Mr. Alexander could be my daddy." Maya's face flushed hot with embarrassment. "Sophie." But Alexander just laughed, crouching down to Sophie's level. "That's a pretty good wish, princess. What would a daddy do? I want to make sure I'd be qualified." Sophie considered this seriously. "A daddy reads bedtime stories. And he plays games. And he makes Mama smile. And he keeps us safe." "Well," Alexander said thoughtfully, "I already do 3 of those things. I think I could probably manage all 4 if given the chance." He looked up at Maya as he said it, and she saw the question in his eyes, the hope, the vulnerability of a man who had everything money could buy but had learned it meant nothing without connection, without love, without purpose beyond profit. Maya's answer came not in words but in her smile, genuine and warm, the smile of someone who had learned that fairy tales sometimes come true, just not in the ways we expect. Not with glass slippers and magic pumpkins, but with kindness in moments of crisis, with systems changed and barriers broken down, with a man who learned to see and a woman who learned to trust. "I think," Maya said softly, her hand finding Alexander's, "that complicated might be exactly right." Sophie, satisfied with the adult conversation she didn't fully understand but sensed was important, went back to watching the butterfly. Maya and Alexander stood side by side, their daughter between them, watching the afternoon sun paint everything golden. For months ago, Maya had been scrubbing floors, desperate and afraid, unable to imagine a future beyond the next crisis. Now she stood in a garden, holding the hand of a good man, watching her healthy daughter play, employed in meaningful work, secure in ways that went beyond finances into the realm of genuine belonging. The transformation hadn't been magic. It had been one person choosing compassion over convenience, humanity over hierarchy, love over indifference. It had been seeing a sick child and choosing to help rather than to judge. It had been recognizing that dignity isn't determined by bank accounts or job titles, but is the birthright of every human being. As the butterfly finally took flight, Sophie clapped her hands in delight. "It's flying home," she announced. Maya watched it go, thinking about home, about how the word had changed meaning. Home wasn't just 4 walls and a roof anymore. It was this moment, these people, this feeling of safety and belonging and hope for tomorrow. "Welcome home," Alexander said softly, echoing her thoughts, and Maya knew he wasn't talking about the cottage or the mansion or any physical space. He was talking about this, the family they were becoming, the life they were building, the love that was growing in the spaces between them, transforming everything it touched. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Maya let herself believe in happy endings, not because they were guaranteed, but because they were possible, and possibility was sometimes the greatest gift of all. Years later, when people would ask Sophie how her mother and father met, she would tell them about a day when she was very sick and a prince disguised as a billionaire helped them when they needed it most. She would say it was like a fairy tale, and in all the ways that mattered, she would be right. Because the best fairy tales aren't about perfection, they're about people choosing to be better, to see clearly, to love generously, and to believe that even in the darkest moments, transformation is always possible. And they lived, if not perfectly ever after, then honestly and lovingly, which is better than any fairy tale could ever be. 5 years had passed since that transformative day when Sophie's fever had changed everything. The autumn sun cast long shadows across the garden where preparations were underway for a celebration unlike any the Montgomery estate had ever seen. Maya stood at the window of what had been the guest room where Sophie recovered, now converted into her personal office. She smiled, remembering how terrified she'd been that first night, watching her daughters struggle with fever, never imagining how completely their lives would transform. "Mama, come see my dress." Sophie's voice rang through the hallway, and moments later, an 8-year-old whirlwind burst through the door. She was wearing a beautiful flower girl dress in lavender, twirling to make the skirt spin out around her. "You look absolutely beautiful, sweetheart," Maya said, kneeling to adjust the ribbon in Sophie's hair. Her daughter had grown so much, tall for her age, bright-eyed, confident in ways Maya had once only dreamed possible. "Is everything ready for tonight?" Sophie asked, her excitement palpable. "Almost," Maya assured her. "The caterers are setting up, the musicians are doing sound checks, and your father is probably pacing nervously in his study." Sophie giggled. "Papa doesn't get nervous." "Oh, he does," Maya said with a knowing smile. "Especially about important things." Tonight was the 5th anniversary celebration of the Montgomery Foundation, the charitable organization Alexander had established 6 months after his engagement to Victoria had ended. What had started as his personal mission to address systemic inequalities had grown into a full-fledged foundation supporting education, healthcare access, and worker rights across the country. Maya served as the foundation's director of operations, a role she'd grown into over the years. She'd completed her college degree online, taking classes at night after Sophie went to sleep, driven by a determination to deserve the opportunities she'd been given. Her graduation 2 years ago had been one of the proudest moments of Alexander's life. He'd thrown her a party that rivaled most weddings. The cottage Alexander had offered her 5 years ago had become their home. Maya and Sophie had moved in 6 months after that pivotal day, and it had been the right decision. The small house had given them space and independence while keeping them close to the life they were building at the estate. Alexander had courted Maya slowly, patiently, respecting her concerns about power dynamics and public perception. Their first official date hadn't happened until 8 months after they'd met, a simple dinner at a quiet restaurant where they could just be two people getting to know each other, not billionaire and former employee. Their relationship had developed naturally, built on genuine friendship and deep respect. Alexander had proposed 2 years later, on Sophie's 6th birthday, asking both Maya and Sophie together because, as he said, he was asking to join their family as much as he was asking Maya to join his life. The wedding had been small and intimate, just close friends and family, held in the very garden where Sophie had once chased butterflies. Marie and the other household staff had attended as honored guests, not workers. Jorge had walked Maya down the aisle, tears streaming down his weathered face. Sophie had insisted on being both flower girl and ring bearer, taking her duties seriously, and when the officiant asked if anyone objected to the union, the 7-year-old had stood up and announced, "I object to waiting any longer. They should be married already." The laughter that followed had been joyful and pure, and Maya had looked at Alexander with such love that several guests later said they'd cried at the expression on her face. Now, 3 years into their marriage, Maya still sometimes had moments of disbelief. She would wake up in the master bedroom of the cottage, Alexander sleeping peacefully beside her, and have to remind herself this was real. This was her life. "Mrs. Montgomery?" Marie's voice came from the doorway. She had become Maya's closest friend and right hand in managing both the household and foundation events. "The first guests are arriving." "Thank you, Marie. I'll be right down." Maya turned to Sophie. "Ready, princess?" "Ready." Sophie took her mother's hand, and together they headed downstairs. The garden had been transformed into an elegant venue. String lights hung between trees, tables draped in white linen dotted the lawn, and a small stage had been erected for the evening's speakers. But this wasn't a typical charity gala. The guest list included not just wealthy donors, but also foundation beneficiaries, families who had received educational scholarships, workers whose companies had adopted the foundation's recommended policies, community leaders from neighborhoods the foundation served. Alexander had insisted on this mixing of worlds. The people doing the work and receiving the support should be celebrated, not just the checkbooks, he'd said firmly when planning the event. Maya found him near the stage, looking handsome in his dark suit, reviewing note cards for his speech. He looked up as she approached, and his face lit up in a way that still made her heart skip. "There's my beautiful wife," he said, pulling her close for a kiss that made Sophie giggle and cover her eyes. "Nervous?" Maya asked, straightening his tie unnecessarily. "Terrified," he admitted. 5 years feels significant. I want to get the speech right. "You will. You always do." Maya squeezed his hand. "Just speak from a heart." As evening fell and guests mingled, Maya found herself reflecting on the journey. The foundation had provided scholarships to over 2,000 students, including full rides to college for 15 children from households where no one had ever attended university. It had helped pass legislation in 3 states requiring paid family leave. It had partnered with 50 companies to implement better worker protections and benefits. But beyond the statistics were the stories. Like Carmen, a single mother of 3 who'd used her scholarship to become a nurse and now ran a community health clinic. Like James, whose company had been the first to adopt the foundation's comprehensive benefits package and had seen productivity soar as worker satisfaction increased. Like little Aiden, who reminded Maya so much of Sophie, receiving treatment for leukemia because his parents' employer had finally offered real health insurance. When it came time for speeches, Alexander took the stage. He spoke about systemic change, about dignity and opportunity, about the responsibility that came with wealth. But then his tone shifted, becoming more personal. 5 years ago, I was engaged to someone who taught me what I didn't want to be. I was living in a mansion, but not really seeing the people who made that life possible. I was successful in business, but failing at basic humanity. His eyes found Maya in the crowd. And then something happened that changed everything. A sick child, a desperate mother, and a moment of choice that revealed truths I'd been avoiding. He told the story, not in detail, respecting Maya's privacy, but in broad strokes. A crisis, a revelation, a decision to do better. That day, I learned that real wealth isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in the difference we make, the systems we change, the barriers we break down. It's measured in children like Sophie. He gestured to where Sophie stood beside Maya, beaming with pride, who get to dream big dreams and have the support to achieve them. It's measured in mothers like Maya, who don't have to choose between caring for their sick children and keeping a roof over their heads. The applause was thunderous. Maya felt tears streaming down her face as Alexander continued, outlining the foundation's plans for the next 5 years, more ambitious, more comprehensive, more committed to fundamental change. When he finished, Sophie tugged on Maya's hand. "Mama, I want to help too. When I'm a veterinarian, I want to help animals who belong to people who can't afford doctors. Like Papa helps people." Maya's heart swelled. "That's a beautiful dream, sweetheart." "It's not just a dream," Sophie said with the certainty of a child who'd grown up watching impossible things become real. "It's a plan." As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Maya and Alexander stood together watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Sophie had fallen asleep on a bench, exhausted from excitement, her flower girl dress slightly rumpled. "Thank you," Alexander said quietly. "For what?" Maya asked, leaning into his warmth.
For being sick that day. For forcing my hand.
"For giving me the chance to be better." He paused. "For loving me despite everything." "I don't love you despite anything," Maya corrected gently. "I love you because of everything. Because you chose compassion when you could have chosen indifference. Because you keep choosing it every single day." They stood in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from truly knowing another person, from building a life together brick by brick. "Do you ever think about where we'd be if things had gone differently?" Alexander asked. "If Victoria had just given you the day off? If I hadn't come home early?" Maya considered this. "Sometimes. But I don't think it would have lasted. One way or another, the truth would have come out. Maybe not that day, but eventually. Truth has a way of surfacing. Wise words, Mrs. Montgomery. I learned from the best, Mr. Montgomery. They collected their sleeping daughter and walked together toward the cottage, their home, their sanctuary. Tomorrow they would return to the work. There was always more work to be done, more systems to change, more lives to impact. But tonight, they were simply a family, grateful for the journey that had brought them together. As Maya tucked Sophie into bed, the little girl stirred. Mama? Did I do good tonight? You did perfect, baby. I'm glad Papa found us, Sophie murmured, already drifting back to sleep. We're lucky. Maya kissed her forehead. Yes, sweetheart. We're very lucky. But walking back to her own room, finding Alexander waiting with that smile that still made her breath catch, Maya thought that luck was only part of the story. The rest was choice, the choice to be kind, to see clearly, to love deeply, to keep trying to build a better world. And that, she thought, was the real fairy tale.